Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook.
Every night of the week we have something to talk about, and we do again tonight. Welcome to the Fan Cave. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. Bob Pompeani alongside Tim Benz. We'll also join you tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown, 11:35 after the late news. We have a lot to get into. Tim, I want to start about the Penguins' trip. They come back, 6-game losing streak, 0-4 on the road for the first time in 8 years. This is a team that has a lot of issues. To me, the #1 issue is lack of scoring, and that sounds obvious, but it comes not just from Malk and Crowd. I'm talking about bottom six. I'm talking about, complementary scoring. Nobody really is putting the puck in the net. The effort during 4 of those games is okay, but overall, they're just not getting enough production.
The only thing that went right on this trip is that they came back without coronavirus. I think. And I'm not even going to go so far as to assure that, because I think that when you go on Twitter or you listen to talk shows or you read columns, factions are dividing within the Penguins fan base now about who deserves the blame for this, as if there's just 1 or 2 people. It's everything. It's the stars not scoring. It's the secondary scoring not scoring. It's the bottom 3 of the defensemen not producing and getting overexposed and overtaxed and overleveraged. It's also the top defensemen not doing a good job in their own end, or are they moving the puck all that well, or scoring themselves. It's, maybe the acquisitions that they got at the trade deadline not being all that good, or maybe it's the coach not figuring out how to use those guys. Bob, it's everything, everybody. There's blood on everyone's hands, and this was a terrible, inopportune time to not get any points here. Like, the Flyers have passed them in the Metro Division standings.
They have
right?
a 6-game win streak.
Yes.
Penguins have lost 6.
Exactly.
There
now,
you go. There's your ground.
The kick in the teeth about this is the Flyers, when they went out west early in the season, the Flyers weren't playing very well. They lost not only to these 3 teams, well, actually it was 5 games. They went to all 5 of the Western teams, and they only walked away with 1 victory. But they had months to recuperate, and they've managed to do so. The Penguins don't have that much time. Time's running out on them. This is a Penguins team right now that is closer to being out of the playoffs than to first place. Has the Washington game ended yet? They're about to win, though, right?
Goals. Yeah, they're up 2 in the third period.
They're up 2 in the third period.
86.
So they have 86 points. Penguins have 80. The Islanders have 74, and they're in 8th place.
The Islanders have 78, I think.
Is it 78 now?
They're 2 behind, yeah.
There you go.
And the Flyers are 83, and so they've won well. That's a good team over there, by the way, in Philadelphia. But the other thing, too, quite frankly, their power play, the Penguins just not getting it done. It's been very sporadic this year. 1 goal on the entire trip out there. They haven't gotten a lot of production. And on the power play, as you mentioned earlier, you got the big names. Those are the guys who're supposed to put up the numbers when you have the man advantage, and they haven't done that. So it's all things. However, I'm not going to over-panic with this one, because I still think this team, Mike Sullivan had a very good comment on the postgame last night where he says confidence is one of those things that can turn with 1 good shift, and all of a sudden you come home, you're playing a bad team, and they have a ton of Eastern Conference teams coming up, so it can change quickly.
Well, that's fair enough, but I think it is indicative that there's a problem that they lost to the poor quality teams that they did. I think that's
the worst.
Very much at issue here, and I'd also hasten to point out that there's a difference between saying that the season is over and let's talk about what's going wrong. I think Penguin fans, more than any other portion of the Pittsburgh fan base, love to do that. They make it sound like any discussion of what's gone wrong during a recent bad stretch is somehow an indictment of all these players' careers or the entire rest of the season that's looming. It's not. But if you want to talk about hockey the same way we talk about football, and a lot of Penguin fans like to do that or prefer that we do that, then you got to talk about it when times are bad, and boy, are times bad for these guys right now.
I also think it's time for Mike Sullivan to choose a goaltender. This rotation, it started off, guys were hot, both playing well. Lately, it hasn't been that way, and I realize it's also contributing with a defense that's given up porous opportunities, odd man breaks. We saw it last night with Evander Kane with a clear breakaway after they turned the puck over, and the Penguins can do that from time to time, and that's not what you want to see going in. Bottom line is, I think you got to decide somebody at some point, and I think that point is getting closer as you have 16 games in 29 days.
I would rather have been in the situation when they were both playing well, and everybody was saying, well, how do you sit one of these guys down? Well, you just choose one if you wanted to. Now that they're both playing poorly, I actually think it's a harder decision for Mike Sullivan to figure out, because one of the issues at hand with the Penguins is over this 6-game streak of theirs, neither Jari nor Murray have ever been the better goalie on any night. Like, did you walk away from any of those games saying that this guy was actually better than the goalie in the other net that
John
beat them?
Gibson won a game because John Gibson was really good in that game against the Penguins. And the Penguins, right, they haven't said that. Goalies haven't won games for them, and they need to start doing that. So we'll see. These are all questions that Mike Sullivan will have to figure out. We're going to take a break. It's 412-575-2670. You can call us, tweet us, let us know what you think about these topics and also Steeler-related. And the Pirates actually starting to hit the ball a little bit. We'll talk about all that and more when we continue live right here on Pittsburgh CW. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Back after this. The Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call is brought to you by Ireland Contracting, putting new roofs on Pittsburgh homes for over 25 years. Call Ireland Contracting at 1-800-NEW-ROOF.